Hello everybody and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over sprint qualifying or sprint races, however you want to call them. And to be honest, my opinions on this have been pretty consistent from the beginning. But with all of that said, as many of people have been saying in the F1 community, let's give it a chance, let's see how it goes. And to some degree I say fine, I'm not against us having these kinds of experiments this year, especially given that it looks as though the championship is going to be Verstappen's anyway. But with that said, as a human being with a brain who cares a lot about F1, I've thought about this a lot, and there are lots of things that I really, really don't like. And there's a big reason that I believe this will flop catastrophically. Now, of course, I could look like an absolute idiot, and then in 10 days' time, when we have it, everyone loves it and it's fantastic. But my prediction is that it will feel very weird, but also very empty. And there's a few reasons for that. The first reason is this basically kills qualifying, right? Just flat out, this whole sprint qualifying, sprint race thing, it kills the actual qualifying. Because what it means is, even if you qualify in P20, or to use a more realistic example, if you're Ricardo, for example, and you qualify in P13, you have a terrible qualifying. It doesn't matter because you have a sprint race where you'll gain many places, and for the actual race where you get the points, or at least the meaningful points, you'll be fine. So it really ruins qualifying. But for me, more than that, sprint races in themselves weren't to be exciting. And here's why. After the Baku Grand Prix, many people were saying that it was a great advert for sprint races and sprint qualifying. And for those of you who don't know, these sprint qualifyings or sprint races, they'll be on the Saturday and there'll be a shorter race, about 50 laps or something like that, relatively short, and the drivers will have a chance to race it out. But the difference between what happened in Baku and these sprint races or sprint qualifying is that in Baku, it actually meant something. At Baku, the drivers getting positions, whether it was Alonso going from P10 to P6, or Seb keeping the podium, Gasly getting the podium, Hamilton bottling it. The reason that was so exciting is because it actually mattered, because it actually affected the points total. These sprint races or the sprint qualifying won't matter because say we have the exact same scenario and say it was lap one of a sprint race and Hamilton goes off. Well, number one, he's got the entire race of 15 laps to make his way back up the grid. But more importantly, even if you have a bad restart, if you have a bad sprint race, you've still got a whole other race, the actual race that counts, to recover. So the finality and jeopardy of F1 is going to be degraded because of this. Any good movie that you've seen, any great sport that you've seen, is because you know that after something happens, there'll be a consequence. That what you're watching is very, very important because if something goes wrong or something goes well, it has a direct impact, a direct meaning behind it. But sprint races won't have that because, say, Giovinazzi retires, fine, because then in the actual race, he'll just start from the back or from nearer towards the back and he'll try and recover from there. So the whole finality and kind of drama of F1 is going to be degraded. But something I also think that people don't give enough credit is that a big reason that F1 and that most races are exciting is because they are very long. And this might sound like a very obvious thing, and of course for a sprint race, people will say, look, it's only a sprint race, it doesn't matter, we've still got the main race. But the whole issue I have with the sprint race is number one, it detracts from the main race, because the main race used to be, and still is, and should always be sacred in F1. It's like a 90 minutes in football. It is what it is. It's the most important part of the weekend. It should be untouched. But with sprint races, that special feeling that you get when watching the main race, number one, is degraded. But perhaps more importantly, the actual sprint races themselves that we're going to watch are unlikely to be exciting because, as we've seen, especially in modern F1, the best races tend to get exciting towards the end. Think of France. It began pretty well. We had Bottas, Hamilton, and Verstappen all very close. But it was exciting at the end because after many laps, there were different strategies and Verstappen caught up. It takes a while for races to become interesting. Baku, excuse me, Baku only became an interesting race because after about 30 laps, we had the first puncture with Stroll, and then at the very end, we had Verstappen's puncture. Now, those were, of course, very dramatic circumstances. We can see the point I'm making. F1 races are exciting because they are long. There's hardly any races that after 10 laps you think, oh, well, that's great. If anything, you kind of expect the first few laps to be hectic. But the mark of a good race is that after 90 minutes, after 2 hours, at the very end, it's still close. So the whole concept for me of a sprint race is highly flawed. It's just another unnecessary step from qualifying to the race. and it does a very, very good thing of minimizing qualifying and also minimizing the races. And all for what, would you ask? If sprint races were some fantastic event that was so exciting to watch, then maybe I'll be proven wrong. And maybe we'll all love them. But I expect that sprint races will feel quite empty and unnecessary. And I think that's the biggest word that I can associate to this entire thing. It's unnecessary. We don't need sprint races. And of course, F1 is all about innovation and constantly striving to improve. But there are some things that you don't change because they are at the core and heart of the sport. And the race weekend format, with the race being the race, is one of them. You might argue, Formula 2, Formula 3, they're exciting and they've got sprints. This is true. But I don't watch Formula 2 and Formula 3 in the same way as F1. Because as much as I find F2 and F3 exciting, if we're being honest, a lot of it is quite contrived, quite forced. And in F1, I want to see the best team, the best driver win. Whether it's Schumacher and Ferrari, Verstappen at Red Bull, Hamilton at Mercedes, I want to see the best team win. I don't want to see F1 trying to create these weird scenarios to try and put off the best teams. And then, no, I want to see the best team win on Sunday. I don't want to see the grid reversed. I don't want to see an extra sprint race. I want the main race to be the main race, and that's that. And aside from this, to me, this shows a very big disconnect between the people owning F1 and the people who watch F1. Because Ross Brawn and the FIA, part of their explanation for why they did this is because apparently, in their own words, younger F1 fans don't want to watch 90-minute races. Number one, I'll say that's stupid because basically any sport, whether it's football, basketball, golf, tennis, whatever, it's long. There's no sport that's 10 minutes. And it's frankly quite insulting that these owners think that young F1 fans just have no attention span. When many of us, like me and like many of you who follow me on Instagram or on Twitter, we sat through hours and hours of testing where half the time they didn't even show the lap times, and even if they did, they were very slow, and it was literally just cars going round and round in testing. And as F1 fans, millions of F1 fans on Twitter, many of whom are younger, watched it. So for me, it's a very clear disconnect, and it's a very frankly patronizing stance that F1's owners have, which is why I was very disappointed to see them explaining it as though F1 fans get bored at watching long races. No, the issue that some F1 fans have, like myself, is that historically it's very hard for smaller teams to compete. And to F1's credit, they are taking steps to kind of minimize the gap between the top and the lower teams with the budget cap. But creating these artificial, contrived things are very unnecessary. And also, qualifying is now going to be on Friday. A lot of people, not myself because I'm 17, but many people work, shockingly enough, and they work on Fridays. There are many people who also work on the weekends, Saturday or Sunday, but the likelihood is that most people will be able to watch the main race on Sunday or at the very least record it. But now you have qualifying on Friday. A lot of people are going to miss qualifying. And on top of that, qualifying, given the sprint race, is going to have so much less meaning that it's not going to feel the same watching it. So for me, there are many, many reasons why I am against F1 and sprint races, sprint qualifying, whatever you want to call it. This was a bit ranty, a bit loud, so if you don't like that, I kind of apologize. But at the same time, I have to give my thoughts. This is why I've got this channel. And I just wanted to say this before we had the sprint qualifying, because it could be I'm proven wrong, but I have a feeling I'll be proven right, and that sprint qualifying won't be as good as people say. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be doing a stream later on today. If you're new, subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.